for joining us on The Last Word tonight. Surely. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on The Last Word tonight. My name is Sophia Wanuna. Madaraka Day it is. I hope you had a good one. Of course, hearing there from the president who officiated the first Madaraka Day that was not held in the capital, being held in Nakuru County at the Afraha Stadium today. And of course, Raila Odinga leading the celebrations as well, marking Madaraka Day with their own rally at the Uhuru Park today, having been invited yesterday by the president to be part of the celebrations at Afraha, of course, choosing to opt out and be with their supporters at Uhuru Park. A lot to discuss tonight with my guest. I want to introduce him to you. His name is Wanyiri Kihoro, I beg your pardon. He's an advocate. He's also chair of the independence movement. He's an author, having authored 3 books, 2. I beg your pardon? Three books. So there's a Prize of Freedom, Politics and Parliamentarians, and which other one?
Kapenguria 6.
Kapenguria 6. Yes. He's also a former detainee, having been in detention between 1986 to 1989. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And also just to mention, later on the show, we'll be hearing from Koigi Wamwere, who we caught up with earlier today. He's a former Subuki Member of Parliament, also a former detainee. So we'll be getting his thoughts on the significance of this Madaraka Day, and also giving us perspectives of where we find ourselves now as a country and where we've come from, and just what it is we need to do to ensure we don't repeat mistakes of the past. As many people have now said, we find ourselves at the precipice as we were in 2007 ahead of that post-election violence. How can the same be averted, not to go down the same road? We just watched that feature earlier by Duncan Haemba on the Grand Divide. How do we ensure the country is cohesive, is united at this very critical point, especially ahead of the next general election? So, Kihoro, again, thank you for being with us tonight. Let's begin with, you were there in 1963, Madaraka Day. Many, of course, Kenyans today, not born at the time. Give us a comparison of the Madaraka Day you witnessed today, you know, the sights, the sounds, the speeches, and what we saw 53 years ago. Thank you for inviting me to this occasion. It is very important. It is the 53rd anniversary of Madaraka. And if I can tell you that the first Madaraka Day, I remember it very well, because it had a lot of affection by our people. And our people were being prepared for independence that came 6 months later on the 12th of December. And our people are happy to be invited by the colonial government to participate in the governance of our country. For a period of 70 years, they had been kept out by the colonial regime, out of the rule and governance of our country. So the first Madaraka Day was the occasion for them to be told, come in, we have realized you are free people, and you can participate in the governance of your country. If you compare that with what we have seen today, I have had a lot of noise, I'm telling you. I can't even remember what I've had. And when you find 53 years down the line, the substance of independence is all gone. What is left is noise and the stomach politics of this country. Right. I've heard somebody say that there is also something now called chicken gate that should not be forgotten. And when I find that the people have been put on one side, the substantive issues that were there during the first Madaraka Day, their love for independence, their love for good education, their love for good health, the eradication of poverty. There were 3 goals that were very dedicated to the freedom of our people in terms of we want to eradicate poverty, ignorance, and disease. If you look at what has happened 53 years down the line, each one of these aspects in our socio-economic life has actually increased manifold. Right. But wouldn't you say the kind of excitement, the kind of utterances and approach, you know, and what was witnessed in 1963 was because largely, if you look at it as a clean slate, beginning from, you know, now charting our own destiny as a country. And now the issues you may dismiss as noise, some would say are critical, because look at IEBC, for instance. We're talking about an election we're going to, and we've seen what happened in 2007. So we know the potential potential of an electoral commission that does not have the confidence of a large populace, and also a judiciary that is not trusted. So don't you think the issues being raised by CORD at such a day as critical as this are important?
I think it is very important. What is being raised by CORD is very, very important. The question of how we conduct elections in this country. And since 92, elections in this country have become more contentious. When you had one-party state, when somebody could be declared as a member of parliament or be declared a president without basically an election, there appears to have been no issue, but basically the issues were very fundamental because the people were being denied an opportunity of exercising franchise in electing who is going to represent them for the next 5 years. If you look at what is now happening, CORD is saying if you are going to elect representatives of our people for the next 5 years to control the central government and control the county governments, we need to have a very credible electoral commission that are going to return people who are actually elected by the people, not people who are going to be cooked in whatever office and in whatever high places. That is what CORD is trying to prevent. And I don't see why even Jubilee itself should be opposed to something that is going to give our people an opportunity of exercising a free franchise in terms of electing a good government at the county level and at the central government level.
All right, and there are people who look at this, especially the competition, if I may put it that way, between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, and trace it back to their fathers, you know, Jaramogi and Jomo Kenyatta, and wonder, is this a score that wasn't settled by the older generation, and that is still haunting these two, and also having an entire country get caught up in whatever the score is here? Do you see it that way, or is it just natural flow of politics?
I don't see it that way, because if I remember, I've written a book called Politics and Parliamentarians in Kenya. And I've written also about the legico in Kenya. And Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was the first person in Kenya's legico to call for the freeing of Kenyatta from colonial detention and from colonial prison. He was the first one in 1860, and he was actually reprimanded by the governor. How can you call for the freeing of a person whom we see as a terrorist? That is 1960. They were together in Kanu. When the first election, which could well have led this country to the first Madaraka Day in 1961, was held under the new constitution done in Lancaster, Jaramogi could well have done what Ronald Gala did. Ronald Gala was the leader of KADU, and in 1961 election, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, he was basically the leader of KANU. And when KANU was asked in 1961 to form a government, Jaramogi turned it down. He said, without Kenyatta, we cannot form a government.
So they started off well.
To the freeing of Kenyatta.
Exactly. So they started off well. They were on the same side, reading from the same script. But back to when now they went separate ways, and there began this tension, and, you know, from different sides, and an antagonistic, if you like, relationship, which we are seeing to date. What linkages, if at all, can you draw between that, you know, those two leaders and their sons today? I
think if you look at the division that then came between Kenyatta and Jaramogi, it came by 1966, and Kenyatta disagreed with anybody who really did not support the kind of colonial regime that we had before. The land question was very important to the Mau Mau people. It was very important to our people. So by 1966, this big divide came within KANU, whereby Jaramogi and somebody like Bill Dadikagia, people who might not even be mentioned today when you're talking about Madaraka Day, they were people who thought that our independence is not giving our people an opportunity to possess the land that had been repossessed from the colonial regime, from the settlers, the white settlers, 4,000 of them. So that is what led to the divide. How we are going to share the land resources in this country and the prosperity of this country that was mainly enjoyed by the settler regime. So by 1969, detention came, Jaramogi is detained. But what is important is that the failure of the government in 1963, 66, to address the land question led to that division. And you can see, up to this point, the land question is one of the most heated questions. You saw what happened in 2007. We have seen the IDP question. Even before we had the IDPs, we had the squatter problem in this country. We have the squatter problem in the Coast province, something we don't normally talk about. But there is a bigger population of landless people in the Coast province in this country, but then you can never imagine. And but we don't want to talk about that problem because...
and those are real issues that we continue to struggle with today. It continues to be an emotive issue land. But in as far as tribal politics, because that is largely where we see, our politics today entrenched, that people will be smart, they will have all this worldview, but when it comes to the ballot and politics, all of that is thrown out the window and everybody reads from their tribal script. So is there that element that began then with those leaders that we still see now play out? Because we keep hearing there's no inclusivity in government, there isn't any, and yet, and on the other hand, you're seeing the government arguing the reason they chose, for example, to go to Nakuru, having been the first national event to be held out of the capital, is to bring about that cohesiveness, to make everybody feel part of.
Does it really make anybody feel part of this situation? I've been asking my son, who comes from the current generation. I do understand, Sophia, that you were born when actually I was in prison in 1986. And I can tell you that my son does not even speak Kikuyu.
Really?
He does not even speak Kikuyu. And I'm
How old
told
is
that he's 32.
Okay.
And he was born even before I went to detention. But the point is that why would young people who don't even speak their mother tongue in this country. When I was being told that we are going to eradicate tribalism in this country, I was told there will be there will be a generation of Kenyans who will not be speaking their mother tongue.
Yeah.
Nearly, I would say, young people, nearly half do not speak their mother tongues today. But why has tribalism increased? Because the leadership in this country has specialized in dividing our people on tribal lines. And it will continue. Even for
and
people
yet
who
it
don't
resonates with the people, because you hear Kenyans talk about, these leaders, they're doing this and the other. But when it comes down to, choosing the leaders, we keep selecting the same people. So it's the lessons.
That is the tragedy. I thought this country should be in the hands of our people. And it is our people who have got eventually the responsibility of putting the leaders in order. It is our people who should put the leaders in order. It is not the leaders themselves because they're eating of it. They are benefiting of it. Even now, the big fight you find about the Electoral Commission, about the next election, is about the next crop of people who are going to eat. It's not about addressing the questions I told you about, ignorance, health, and disease. We have got more educated people in this country today than we had at independence. So
it's about whose time is it to eat. But let's look at, 2007, pre the election then, and then pre the post-election violence. And the elections body, the judiciary, we find ourselves in the same situation, similar almost, at the brink. Some have described it as such. Are you worried?
I'm a very worried person in terms of my country making progress and starting to address very fundamental human issues, socio-economic issues that disturb me and disturb everybody. If I've just told you that we have got now more illiterate population. The other day I was being told by a young person who is only 15 years, who cannot even write his name. And then I wonder, are we going to start again to do adult education so that we start educating people who become adults without knowing how to read and write? That is going to be a slave.
Yes.
In this country, when you can't be able, when you are illiterate in your country. So I think if I compare what has happened in the past and what is now happening, I think we are wasting a lot of our time. We are not addressing the issues. And it is our people who have to rise up. A long time ago, we only used to have one radio station. Today, we have got multiple radio stations. We have to listen and reason out and ask, where are these leaders who are elected? If you look at some of the leaders today, they have been in parliament for the last 5 parliaments. Myself, I was only elected once. And I found it impossible even to hold on to my seat.
Why?
Because I found it impossible because what it's about is about me stealing and distributing the goods of civilization.
And people love the thieves because even a recent study that showed young people nowadays love the so-called wealthy and don't even care if that wealth is acquired by means of corruption. As long as they're wealthy, that's what's attractive to them, and they will even take a bribe to be able to cast their votes for those kind of individuals. So this is rot that is gone so deep that God have mercy, would you say?
I totally agree with you, and basically that is why I'm saying they don't speak their mother tongues. Now they want money for free.
But why didn't you teach your son your mother tongue, his mother tongue? Because
my son was born overseas at a time when I was in exile.
Okay.
And I thought, I'm going to make out of my son a better Kenyan. So he is not going to learn his mother tongue, he's going to learn Swahili. So he speaks, even though born in London, lived in London for 30 years, he speaks fluent Kiswahili, but doesn't speak Kikuyu.
All right,
and he speaks good English also.
And good English. Let's bring it back to the current situation, because you say what we saw ahead of the 2007 elections and after, and now what we're witnessing, almost similar situations, but weren't there measures put in place to sort of try to cure the issues that arose? For example, the electoral reforms that now we have Constitution of Kenya 2010, which the president, even in his speech today, continues to drum up and say, we've come a long way. And even the deputy president in his speech, let us not destroy what we put in place to help us deal with potential issues. For example, judiciary, we have the Supreme Court now in place, but look at the mess they're in. So would you say the Constitution has not so far achieved what it was meant to?
I'm telling you, the Constitution has not settled my country. Would have been a very happy man who would see my country at the level of the executive government, at the level of parliament, at the level of the judiciary, settled, and all those people who are being paid a salary by the taxpayer, discharging their duties with certain loyalty to the people and to their country. Now I find that has been thrown out of the window, and loyalty is only to the paycheck at the end of the month. So I find it very disappointing. At the county level, we have got 47 counties. At independence, I must tell you, the first Madaraka day we had 41. Nairobi was an extra provincial district. So we have now 47. That is a bit of an increase. But the county governments, what I've been seeing on television about the so-called campaigning, like I've seen in Nyeri and other places, it is fighting. It is no longer a recent doubt campaign about I have been in office for a period of 5 years. These are my achievements. I'm prepared to continue if you elect me. That is how it should be. But now that is not what is happening. What is happening is dish out money to some goons to go and fight your opponents, make sure they don't rise up, and that is the tragedy of it, that at the central government level, at the county level, the new constitution has not stabilized my country. And as I have said before, it is all on my people to be more reflective about what they're doing. If they want money dished out during the electoral period of about 3 months, so that they can sell their right for the next 5 years, that will happen ad infinitum. It will continue forever.
So, for example, with the IBC question, the constitution, the law is clear in as far as how the procedure is, what it is to remove these commissioners from office, and that's what the government has maintained, that those who are calling for the removal of commissioners should follow due process. However, opposition is saying, because they don't have the numbers, why even bother? It's not going to work. In fact, they say they've tried and it hasn't, so they're calling for dialogue. Which one do you agree with?
I think dialogue is important because I think a lot of what is coming from the opposition, from CORD, arises from what happened in 2013. What happened and the way the scandal has come out about what happened in terms of management of the election. I saw also they are talking about buying new equipment at so much money, discarding the old equipment that was there. It cost a fortune to our country. Every time you want to be doing an experiment, every 5 years you want to be doing an experiment.
But wouldn't you be doing an experiment anyway if you bring in new people now, with the time we have to the election?
There are people who are proven in this country who can discharge their duties with loyalty to the electorate and to their country in a way that they are not going to be taken again to anniversary towers to eat for another 5 years.
So their opposition is saying 4 days they've given the government to be able to produce a list of people they want to be part of these negotiations. If failure, to which they continue with their demonstrations every Monday. Are you in support of those demonstrations? Because there are those who've said those demonstrations only go to heighten the political temperature, which is not good for the country.
I think the demonstrations have come as a way of the opposition pressurizing the government, that every Monday we are going to have some protest because we are failing to address a very fundamental issue. Taking it that if these demonstrations do not continue, it's possible that the government will be very happy to wait until the election time, and the people who have been discredited will be in possession. They are going to do another chicken gate or another goat gate or a sheep goat gate. Anything is now going to be possible. So myself, I would think that because I've seen it also I've listened to both sides, and I think what is important is to have this electoral commission go. I think it should just go. They have had 5 years. Why do you want to hold on? There's not a judge position.
They have, the law is on their side. The laws, they still have their 10 years to go. You know, next year, is it in November, is when most of them are leaving office. So at this particular point, many of them argue it's their conscience, it's the goodwill that's been appealed to, but they take it back to the law and say the law is very clear. If you want to take us out, this is the procedure. But everybody is appealing and say, be nice and just leave. If the country works that way, as the Deputy President today was saying, you know, we can't just say that now we're, after going through that treacherous, if you may, process to get a supreme law, then say, let's now forget the law because it's an inconvenience, and let's do tete-a-tete, is how he described it today.
I think it should be possible for peace. If we are talking about having peace in this country.
Right.
And looking at what happened in 2013, the discredited election in the way that the opposition felt cheated, the way that we have got an impeding election where those who are going to be elected are going to be in office for another 5 years. Okay. I think there is no problem about just going by the letter of the law, just saying the Constitution says. If you are doing a bad job, why don't you also go?
All right. So who do you think should mediate this dialogue?
I've seen the clerics again have come. They are part of the solution. I think there are very many. We can pick one person, a good judge.
Okay.
So I've been in the field 30 years. If I'm only called to duty on matters about, let us know and let us agree, and I'm able to speak myself. I can speak to the people in the opposition and the people in government. If I can speak to all of them across and they have certain respect for me, we want somebody who is not going to be interested in the election. And myself, I'm not interested in even any office. I would only want some opportunity for reconciliation, bringing the parties together, and they agree on what they want. But I don't think the name calling and the talking across the board is going to help. So long as that is not going to give, and time also is running out, because we got a constitutional date by which we must have an election. And we don't want to have the kind of repeat of what happened during the last election. Elections were supposed to be held in August 2012, and those who were in office do not want the election held.
So it was moved to March.
And then it moves to March, and we want some sanity in this process, and we want some independent-minded people who are going to do the job of just reconciling and ensuring that an election is not eating time. It is a time to elect a government so that we can deal with what used to be called during the first Madaraka day, the three enemies of man.
Which are?
Which are illiteracy, poverty, and ignorance.
Okay.
They were supposed to be the three enemies. And I'm telling you, now they have increased, because we have been looking the other way as the infiltrate to the society.
Now it's individuals going at each other. You've talked about, the Constitution and your disappointment with it. Are you then disappointed with even the formation of the Supreme Court? Because that came, with the Constitution of Kenya 2010. We now have a Supreme Court which arbitrates on the presidential election, a crucial task it has. And look at the manner of issues it's embroiled in at the moment. Do you think it should be scrapped? Is it something you'd advocate for? It should never have been in the first place?
For a long time we fought for a Supreme Court because we thought the last stop in terms of the judiciary, should not be a court of appeal. We thought it is going to be the Supreme Court that is elevated to that level, give judgments, especially on matters that happened during the one-party state. Something that I found now impossible, things that had happened before the coming into in the promulgation of the new constitution. They don't want to look at that. And I thought there is very bad law that was made before even the constitution. And that should be the opportunity they should have taken to look at what has gone wrong in the past, and they should welcome decisions that they can make that is going to clarify the law, is going to reinstate a statute law and override the former constitution. I thought that is what will happen. That has not happened, and I think there appears to be a lot of time on the part of the Supreme Court judges to do some mischief.
Do you agree with those who say this is all about succession? Who is in control? Who's the president, with the Chief Justice expressing a desire to retire next month?
I thought...
Actually, is it this month? We're in June now, yeah.
Now you're already in June,
yeah.
I think succession is important, but I don't think even the joking for possession is going to produce the Chief Justice who should see himself or herself as having the respect, the recognition, the knowledge that also goes with the high office.
Yeah.
Because I believe that also there are certain people whose names have heard being mentioned as being in so-called running for Chief Justice, who should be keeping away and hiding, putting their heads in the sand, because they don't have the qualification, they don't have the credentials, they don't have any record. And that position is such a respectable position that if you know you have misbehaved in the past, you should not even subject yourself to anything like being interrogated by the whole society about how did you manage. And I congratulate the current CJ, because also in a way he has caused the problem because of saying, I want to go myself. And
would you ask him to stay on, because of this debacle, especially the intrigues around the age, retirement age, and tomorrow there is a ruling on whether, Judge Njoki Ndongo as well as the CJ conducted themselves rightfully, and 3 of the Supreme Court judges as well facing misconduct allegations in putting a moratorium on judicial services. Then there's the allegations on corruption on Judge Tunoi. So there's every single one of them is facing one or the other, or questions being raised. Would you then ask the CJ to stay put a little bit longer and just let this settle down?
I think so long as there's no violation of the Constitution, because I won't advocate that, I can see that he has not really attained the retirement age, which has been attained by some who don't want to go.
Although there's a conflict in terms of the question of his age, real age, because of the ID, this discrepancy of some of his documents, birth certificate, I believe, and I think it is the ID, but they have different years reading. So even that, but maybe that's why some have suggested he chose to leave early, so that does not become the issue of discussion.
I think there's a doctrine in law where I don't think in this kind of situation, where surrounding circumstances about all the other judges are such that they don't give you freedom to leave the office unoccupied. I think there is a good argument that can be made for, if the only issue around you is about your date of birth and what you are.
But that date of birth is significant to your age, and age is one of the big questions right now dominating the debate in the judiciary.
I think that is important. I was thinking that it is something that can be clarified before the date, but I believe also that he has already indicated that he would be prepared to go without violating the Constitution if there is any time left on his birth certificate. I think he should serve it.
He should serve on. Well, we still have lots to discuss, sir. Thank you so much for staying with us. We want to take a break here on The Last Word. When we return from the break, we'll be going to an interview with Koigi Wawamwere, who is a former political detainee. He was also Subukia Member of Parliament once. So we'll hear his thoughts on Madaraka Day, 53rd anniversary of Kenya's internal self-rule, what his thoughts are and perspectives, especially on the gains as well as lost opportunities so far. So we'll listen to that and we'll continue that discussion here in studio. Feel free to tweet me at Sophia Wanun and share your thoughts about our discussion tonight.
This is KTN News.
So what is Morning Express all about?
I really want to continue advocating for children living with HIV.
Mike, if something were happening to me and what was carrying me across to that,
It would be nice for him to let me know that he has been real.
You do not bring me the most corrupt guy in the former past regimes and tell me you're bringing a hand of experience. We don't need that experience.
It's very clear to me what's happening here. It's politics. And I think that's what we need to go beyond. By virtue of them attacking Joho, they are actually making him larger than life.
University?
In Europe, Universidad Utrecht.
Sorry?
Universidad Utrecht.
What happens when the incisive, candid, and authoritative collaborates with the courageous, fearless, and bold? News sources.
Kutoka pwani ya Kenya, mimi ni Francis Ontomwa na hii ni KTN News.
This is KTN News.
With the freedom, we were able to restore the country of Kenya to ourselves. Here we have to remember that colonialism had baptized Kenya as the white man's land. In fact, where we are was called White Highlands. So with Madaraka, we no longer had, Kenya was no longer white man's country, it was our country. The second gain is the fact that with land, with the country restored back to us, we were able to take over lands that were upon which Europeans had settled, of course, at a cost. We were able to get those lands back and redistribute them to the people. If you take an example, Nakuru is a good example of that program of land redistribution. Before independence, every inch of land in this district or county was owned by white people. So was Laikipia. A good example is Lord Dalamea's land that stretches from Nakuru to Naivasha. Today, however, you find that the land is a perfect black landscape. It is settled by Africans almost to its entire length. The number of white settlers that we have are Kenyan whites, whom we can also call black, to the extent that they have sworn their allegiance to the black man's land of Kenya. We have established our own government, so we govern ourselves as opposed to before, when we were governed by the governor. As we celebrate the 53rd, we cannot forget that if we were under colonialism, the ceremonies today would have been managed by a colonial government. But today we had our own government supervising and our own leaders, where the government wasn't, were responsible for the meetings that they attended. So that is a huge jump from the days of colonialism. Independence would have made absolutely no sense if it didn't get rid of the colonial apartheid, the white apartheid that we had here. And of course today people may not remember, especially those who were born after independence, but we had a system very much similar to that in South Africa. So to me, these were major gains. But of course, all the time I look at Madaraka, each time I have to look at it from the point of view of being a destination or half destination in our journey from the Egypt of colonial pharaohs across the Red Sea. I think that we have wasted a lot of opportunities. You have heard it said, and I was reading about it 2 days ago from the ambassador of South Korea, that indeed by the time we got independence at 63, we were at par with South Korea. Now Korea is the 10th biggest economy in the world. We were at par with Singapore. They are probably, I don't know whether they are fourth, or at least not, they must be within the first 6 world economies. We were at par with Malaysia. We were at par with Brazil. We were at par with all these other third world countries. But unfortunately, these other countries made the right choices, especially in the matter of leadership. And because they picked the right leadership, they were able to advance. Today, they are members of the first world. The second thing, the second mistake we made was choosing a wrong system. Many people do not like to discuss the failures of our system. But the fact is that the system we inherited from colonial days and from colonial government and from colonial system is a system that breeds more poverty than wealth. And this is why each year we continue to get poorer rather than wealthier. But I have been to Scandinavia, I have been to Europe. There are beautiful systems of redistributing their wealth among all their citizens. After independence was multi-party democracy. Soon after, we transformed that multi-party democracy into a single-party state, into a single-party dictatorship. And I have always said that having been a system of that system, it was literally hell on earth. It could not have been worse. And the truth is, because of that system, we spent most of our time trying to overthrow it, as if we were starting another struggle against colonialism all over. The last one, I think that we lost, is when we abandoned nationalism. You remember, by the time we got independence, we were a very nationalistic society, a very patriotic people. But instead of pursuing our unity, we decided to go ethnic, forgetting that negative ethnicity had been used by the colonial system to divide and rule us. The freedom did not fall from the skies. It was bled for. And it's rather unfortunate that as we celebrate this day, we hardly forget this aspect of the day, which is very, very important, because it is not justified to reap fruits of a tree that someone else has planted and watered without giving credit to those people.
All right, Koigi Wamwere there, a former political detainee, talking about where Kenya has come from and saying that at one point there was more of a nationalistic approach in as far as the matters of the country. And as we talk tonight to Wanyeri Kihoro on the show, and we want to hear from you as well on your thoughts tonight, the president has been talking about a nationalist covenant since he gave his State of the Nation address early in the year. He touched on the same today, talking about the journey that we've taken to get to where we are and the importance of this covenant that as a people we must fight to protect. Do you buy into this, and do you think it's resonating with the country, with the citizenry, that there's a covenant with which we must uphold higher? Because he also touched on, leaders will change. He will leave power, there will be another 10th president, whatever, but Kenya will remain, and everyone must be cognizant of that.
It must be a Kenya that is nationalist, not a Kenya led by the Home Guards. It is a Kenya that answers to the cry of its own children, its own young people, in respect of the increasing poverty that we have seen in this country. The president has done well to talk about the nationalist covenants, but it is very important to bring that home. You bring that home by remembering that last year on the 27th of March, the president talked about restorative justice. And this year in March, he speaks about the Nationalist Covenant. Now that restorative justice, he talked about 10 billion shillings that is going to be available to restore the rights of certain people, like Kakoyi has just said, that from 1982-83, many of our people dedicated their life to the overthrow of a totalitarian state in our country. And what we wanted is freedom and democracy.
Right.
Now, the president should address that question. Nationalist covenant, we need firstly to deal with all those aging Mau, like the one I saw in the Nation today, the postmaster. We want to deal with all these aging Mau, the aging nationalists, people like Mark Mwethaka, who told me that there's a time when he was held in detention in Marsabit. And before he was freed, the people in Marsabit would tell him, why do you go home? And there's your home, we are going to elect you. If you want to go to parliament, you said you as our representative. Ashing Oneko in Nakuru was told as much. He was elected as an MP in Nakuru town. Somebody like Clement Rubebe is elected in Nairobi, or even Tom Mboya. You find there is this feeling of you being Kenyan during the first Madaraka day. Something that is totally lacking in the amount of raka, in the exchanges that I've seen, in the debate that has now degenerated into what we have today, where we are talking about we can see ahead, we are not going to have a free and fair election. What we are going to have is another unfortunate situation, and that is what you're trying to prevent.
To have, with all due respect to the parties involved, but you talk about these individuals and that attention should be put on them, on honoring them and giving them a decent livelihood and even compensation, as you said there. But you also have interesting views about today. You don't think it should be Madaraka Day. You think it should be Mashujaa Day. We already have Mashujaa Day coming up later in the year.
Mashujaa Day, the way it is now named in this country, the 20th of October, is really not a Mashujaa Day. Because that is a day when a state of emergency is declared in your country to fight the Mau, to fight for liberation. And then you have a colonial governor, Evelyn Baring, declare a state of emergency in this country, and that is what we are perpetuating by talking about the 20th of October being Mashujaa Day. It should not be. Today is the true Mashujaa Day, because that is when our people start self-rule, and from that they move on to take over the reins of power in their country. So for me, if you ask me, I would say today is the genuine Mashujaa Day, where our people start self-governance and then they move on to freedom. But not a day when they are humiliated, when they are arrested, and like Jomo Kenyatta is arrested on 20th of October. Is that something you really want to remember on the 20th of October, that he is arrested, he is incarcerated? There are many pictures you find in many places where he is there in the middle, he is being marched into prison. That is not what we want to remember on a Mashujaa Day. Today is the true Mashujaa Day.
Today is a true Mashujaa Day, you say. And one of the things the president talks about as well was the politics in this country, and that there's a lot of love, or love actually is the word he used, for politics, and it dominates a lot of the national discourse. But he also emphasized the importance to temper that so that to ensure we don't go overboard. Do you agree with those sentiments? Do you think we get caught up in a lot of the narratives around the politics and forget the real issues which you've talked about, education, illiteracy? We've had Koigi Wamare as well there talk about countries where at independence who are the same level today, where
South Korea, Malaysia or Singapore, they were at the same level of development.
So
they were coming here to learn something.
Yeah, our politicization of everything.
See, what has happened is that we have entrusted our people with a very important responsibility. And unfortunately, you see, colonialism never taught our people, never gave them basic education. And therefore, when they've been given this big responsibility of electing a government, exercising franchise, they realizing the responsibility that has been put in their hands in terms of their future. Not only their future, but also their children and posterity. That is not what they're doing. And that is why you find, in between elections, the level of politics in this country is totally intolerable. It is called politics, but I'm telling you it is not politics. Because politics is about issues, socio-economic issues in your society. It is not about the eating and who is going to eat. So that is the problem, that it is inevitable to have this quantity of politicking about the eating in between elections. Because like America today, they are preparing for elections that are going to be held in October, and you find there's a lot of name-calling only before elections. But as soon as a mandate is given out, then the person is given 5 years or 4 years to serve that mandate. And what has happened in this country is it is not even possible to give that mandate, because the people who are getting elected, they are not actually elected on a basis of dealing with the issues that are there in society. What they have been elected maybe because they dished out the goods. They had the money, they had a deal they did, and they have come with big money, they have been elected. So immediately as soon as they are elected, people start saying, no, we got the wrong person. They didn't expect it. And that is why the politics must continue, and the president is right. But I think to minimize the level of politicking in between elections, we need to elect dignified, respectable leaders who are dealing with the issues.
It's interesting you say that, elect dignified people that will deal with the issues. Yesterday in a show I hosted, one of the sentiments that were made by one of the guests was that these people who would make exactly what you've described shy away from politics, or will get in and leave because of the nature of the politics. That you go in there and what it is about really will corrupt even the good. So at the end of the day, then when you go in as this person with all these ideals and, a very clear manifesto of what you want to achieve, you go and find that's not what it's about. It's about who's going to dish out more money to the electorate to get them to vote. So is it that the culture of our politics is so entrenched that it sucks the good from even those well-meaning individuals who seek to go in there and make real change, so that then we end up with a bunch of the same quote-unquote rotten potatoes? I
think there are very few elected leaders who go over the bar of elections and get re-elected. But if you look back, first Madaraka Day, and the people who were elected, one thing that was missing during the 1961 and 1963 election was money. Money was not an issue. They elected somebody because of his commitment, either to the liberation of our country or because of his view about what he's going to do in a period of 5 years when he's elected to parliament.
Right.
People like Jean-Marie Serone or Shikuku or people like Waruru Kanja, they didn't go to the electorate with bags of money. And I'm telling you, they got elected 3 times, 4 times, because our people also had stabilized in terms of what do we expect from parliament. And I can tell you that now it becomes more difficult even to hold on to your seat, because even in parliament, what people expect is you come with the goods when the elections are declared. And all those people is like a curse of parliament. But there is something awaiting you you get elected, and as soon as you land in parliament, all the abuse from the last parliament is carried forward, like the accountants will say. They carry forward the abuse, the indignity of the last parliament. So now, last 4 parliaments or 5 parliaments is about the cast. And I'm very happy to see that what happened at the beginning of this parliament was an attempt to start addressing the question. Because I think the question of how much a salary, what allowances does a member of parliament earn? And it has now turned out a salary of half a million shillings. It has turned out the allowances of half a million. They can take a mortgage of 40 million shillings, payable in 5 years and before the next election. I think all that, what it has done is really converted Parliament from being a place of exchange of ideas, visionary ideas. It has turned it into a kind of stock exchange. And that is no good for a country.
So as well, where we find ourselves now, and I think I've said that a couple of times tonight, in as far as that our diversity is also a double-edged sword in as far as top leadership at the national level, so that now you have president and a deputy president. There are those who have proposed a different system of structure of governance at the national level, where you have position of prime minister, deputy prime minister, because of the numerous, multiple communities we have, to allow for that inclusivity and for people to feel as if they're part of the center, is to expand that space, so that then the contestation is not as vicious and life or death as largely we've seen. Do you agree with those kind of
I agree, and I don't want to say it again that I was in the no campaign. And I was in the no campaign with a reason. And even my friend Koigi, we were together in the no campaign. Right. One of the aspects that we are raising is you are vesting too much power in the presidency. And even if you are going to have county governments, 47 county governments, there's still too much power that is vested. Like when you have a president who is going to be in office and is going to have the whole cabinet is people who are not elected by the people. That I didn't like myself, and he didn't like it, and many people didn't like it. And you can see what has happened since that time in the last 4 years. Right. So I think that question of too much power in the presidency, there are some people also who were in government then who did not talk about it because they are benefiting. Or they thought they are going to land elsewhere where they didn't end up. So I think that question of dissecting again and introducing certain amendments to our constitution that are going to moderate the powers that are vested in the presidency so that we can diffuse power. It is okay having all these county government, and even though I think many of them are very spendthrift, wasting too much resources, and too many of these people are going on a holiday instead of working for the people. I believe in work myself. Okay, so you believe expand that space? And I think that needs to be expanded, and I think that is where the independent movement also in this country, we should have an advantage of taking control of the county governments. If we can take 24 county governments, we can also control the central government, and there's going to be a coalition of independent counties which have got their own government, and they can meet and agree on the kind of government they are going to have at the center.
Do you also get the feeling, as some have claimed, that this government is clamping down on dissent? It's operating on a mindset that, we have since fought to come out of? Because you look at, former President Mwai Kibaki, there were still anti-government protests in his regime, but we did not see the kind of clampdown we're seeing now. For instance, ahead of the Madaraka Day celebrations today, and the court announcing they'll have their rally, the Security Council had come out to say, no, that should not happen because of security risks. In fact, talking about a coup that individuals from neighboring country are plotting with some unscrupulous people from within. And then, of course, the courts came in to nullify the same. So what would you say about how the government is approaching dissent and those who don't necessarily see eye to eye or read from the same script to them?
I think it is a tragedy that I've seen some of the preparations that have been made. The kind of Black Maria vehicle, I know you don't know about a Black Maria. I've seen different ones today, but I think the way in which you want to intervene and you want to be the government, even on matters that are so oppositional, I don't think it is necessary. Sometimes we just allow you say that we have looked at the Constitution and we have seen you have got a right of protest. And you know what? by just holding your hand, you diffuse a lot of the dissent that we are fighting today. By just holding your hand as a government, allow these freedoms. And I'm telling you, those people will do it once, and second time they will find nobody is even interested.
Is interested.
And they might go to, already I've seen so many of them have been injured.
Yeah, that sometimes the more resistance or, that kind of opposition is what gives relevance, gives more attention, what gives more significance. So
that intervention.
It becomes the opposite effect.
That is not, it is not necessary. And I think, let me say this, that some of the most effective presidents like America have had now, Obama is number 44 president.
Right.
Some of the most effective presidents are not the people who put their finger on everything. They are people who know whom to put in business in respect of a certain aspect.
All right, our time
that is what is important.
Is about up, and I don't want you to go before you talk to us a little about this book. Your book, The Price of Freedom, the story of political resistance in Kenya, Wanyiri Kihoro. Because we are still at a time when we're talking about the price of freedom, and there are those who feel like there isn't yet an understanding of how much time, and how far we've come from, to attain this freedom. So talk to us about this book.
Yeah, and I did the book. Let me say that unfortunately, when my wife was in hospital for a period of 3 years, and I thought that is a way of keeping my mind from what was going through my mind. And I think it's a good book in terms of the history it gives our country and our people about their struggle.
Yes.
If we asked at independence, no African would ever even have the material. The material I put in this book is about the protests that the black people did 1922. Harithuku, he protested about the colonial governor refusing to give titles to African people. 1939, people who were detained, people like Joseph Kang'ethe. There are some people who live today in Joseph Kang'ethe. They won't tell you a word about who Joseph Kang'ethe was. They might think it's a name just that is just forgotten. Nobody knows what it's about. Joseph Kang'ethe estate. And there are people who were taken to detention at the beginning of the Second World War. There are a whole group of them. I put them in the book. Then the Mau Mau detainees, 1952 up to 1960, when we come to the end of the state of emergency. We have now a Lancaster House Constitution in 1960. It is revised in 1962. And then our country gets now the first Madaraka in 1963, June 1. So this is a good book in terms of it has got all the history of my people. I want to be a black person and write about the settler regime in this country. I write about the struggle of our people towards liberation and be inspired by other people like Nelson Mandela, or inspired by someone like Kwame Nkrumah, and inspired by Gamal Abdel Nasser, people whom we thought at independence during the 60s, during the 70s, there were people whom a young person, a young black person was worth emulating.
Was worth emulating. And that is a good note to wind it up. It has been a great pleasure hosting you tonight on The Last Word. Wanyiri Kihoro, who's an advocate, he's a chair of Independence Movement, of course, as well as an author. And one of the books there is The Price of Freedom. And thank you all for joining us as well on The Last Word. Have a good night and God bless Kenya.